All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to PIX on Politics. I'm Dan Manarino, and this week we are taking a close look at the executive budget laid out by Mayor Eric Adams. The mayor reaffirming his support for the NYPD by increasing its funding. Adams saying the key to New York City's rebound is addressing public safety. More money also going to the city's safe haven homeless shelters. The mayor set on moving people off the streets and then inside. The Department of Education will receive funds for literacy programs and career training, and more child care for low-income families. Mayor Adams has lofty goals for this city, but some say there were some issues that fell through the cracks. New York City Comptroller Brad Lander named Rikers as one of those issues. He tweeted out saying this: the mayor's plan precedes 500 correction officers without making urgent reforms to staffing management failures that have left our jails in crisis. So to further break down the budget and more, we're going on the record with Comptroller Brad Lander. And the Comptroller is now joining me. So Comptroller Lander, thank you for being here on PIX on Politics. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's really great to be on your show. I really appreciate you.
Of course. So, Comptroller, let's begin with the budget, right? The mayor unveiling a lot. There were pros and cons. Let me get your overall thoughts briefly here on the actual budget that you read.
So this $99.7 billion executive budget proposal does have some strong new investments. You mentioned the safe haven beds and other paths to safe shelter for people who are on the streets. There's good investments in transportation. There's a great set of investments in parks. So those are all good things. But there really is a ways to go if we are going to use these resources wisely for a more inclusive recovery from the pandemic, and also something that gets our city in stronger footing for years to come.
So, Comptroller, I want to zero in on parts that you were critical of, one of those being Rikers Island, right? And the mayor wanting to hire more correction officers. You said this fell short of making urgent reforms to staffing management. But I guess the question here is, wouldn't hiring more staff, since they have such a problem right now, be a benefit? What else would you like to see?
Right now, on any given day, we are paying about 20% of corrections officers not to work. There just is a mass staffing management crisis there. So about 20% of corrections officers are failing to show up for work every day, and yet we're continuing to pay them with no reforms to change that. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that we have in this year's budget and in next year's budget to pay people not to do their jobs at Rikers. So yes, we need the staff complement there, but we can't afford to keep paying hundreds of millions of dollars to people who aren't showing up to work. So before we add 500 new lines, we have to make those reforms so that we aren't spending hundreds of millions of dollars wasted.
Got it. Got it. So, and when it comes to public safety overall, the mayor wants to increase funding for the NYPD. Now, you in the past were somebody who wanted to slash funding for the NYPD. So are you in favor of the mayor's plan to increase funding for the police department, especially given what's happening with crime stats right now on the streets?
Look, this is a broad question of our priorities in total. You know, we spend more, and we have for quite a few years. This isn't just this budget. We spend more on policing than we do on the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, the Department of Youth and Community Development, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, all our violence interrupter programs, and all our economic and workforce development programs combined. So what we want to see is smart investments in the things that make communities safe. So I was glad to see big new increases in our gun violence and violence interrupter and crisis management systems. Really glad to see that safe haven beds and some of the outreach that we talked about. So I think there are some things in there, but there is more to do. And, you know, one thing that wasn't enough focus on is spending the federal pandemic dollars that we have wisely. We put out a report 2 weeks ago about the ways in which there's hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe as much as $1 billion that we're getting from the federal government that we're supposed to be spending in our schools right now on the supports our kids need that is going unspent. We got to make sure we're getting that money where it needs to.
So real quick, because I want to move on to other topics, do you anticipate this being passed?
Well, there's now, you know, the executive budget is the mayor's proposal, and now the council and the mayor will go back and forth. They'll reach a budget by the end of June. The council's pushing for much bigger investments in affordable and supportive housing, in more for sanitation. I'm just at a rally about composting and improvements on trash pickup. So I'm optimistic the mayor and the council will reach a good budget, but we have to, you know, point out what needs to be strengthened, more money for reserves for the long term. And, you know, that's what we'll be doing in the coming weeks. I'm optimistic we'll get there.
Got it. We're limited on time, so I do want to move on. to this other big topic right now, and that's redistricting, because a judge actually struck down these new redistricting maps. So I'm curious, what does this mean for Democrats moving into, I guess, the primary season? Do you have a response?
Look, this is a real tragedy for American democracy. The fact that the only two choices are either Texas and Florida gerrymander and ratchet up Republican House seats, and so New York gerrymanders and ratchets up Democratic House seats. The State Court of Appeals, the fact that they don't like gerrymandering, we don't like gerrymandering, but we also don't like a House of Representatives that's unfairly tipped to an anti-democratic proto-fascist party because they'll cheat and we don't. It's a lose-lose situation that now, unfortunately, New York has to manage.
Something that I've really heard you be real outspoken on are these workplace injustices that you and your office are looking into right now, and some of that begins with Amazon. So tell us more about the Vote No campaign that you're involved in and why you do not want to see the re-election of two specific Amazon board members.
Thank you for asking. Obviously, we've all been inspired by the Amazon workers organizing on Staten Island, demanding safer working conditions, some time for breaks, less turnover, and not to have their rights violated. The job of overseeing workplace issues at Amazon is held by the board of directors. They're supposed to be providing workplace.
All right, we actually just lost.